Dr. Minji Park wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stared at the glowing screen in front of her. The research station felt cold and empty at night, but she could not sleep. For weeks, she had been studying the brain of a captured alien warrior. The creature was locked in a special cell 3 floors below, but its mind was here with her, displayed in colorful patterns on her computer. The aliens called themselves the Kalani. They had been attacking human colonies for 6 months now, moving from planet to planet like a deadly storm. Their ships appeared without warning. Their soldiers fought with perfect coordination, and they never seemed to make mistakes. Every human battle plan failed against them. Every defense fell within days. Minji was a brain doctor, a scientist who studied how minds worked. The military had brought her the captured Kalani to understand how their thoughts were different from humans. What she found scared her more than any weapon. The alien's brain never stopped moving. Millions of thoughts flowed through it every second, but none of them belonged to the creature itself. It was like looking at a river made of other people's ideas. The Kalani did not think alone. Every member of their species shared the same giant mind, the same thoughts, the same plans. This was why they fought so well together. This was why humans kept losing. Minji rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the clock. It was past midnight, but she needed to understand more. She pressed a button to record the alien's brain activity, then leaned back in her chair. The patterns on the screen pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and strong. That was when she heard the singing. Someone was walking down the hallway outside her lab, humming a soft melody. The voice was low and gentle, the kind of song a mother might sing to help her child fall asleep. Minji recognized the tune. It was an old Korean song her grandmother used to sing when she was little. She was about to ignore it when something amazing happened on her screen. The alien's brain patterns suddenly changed. The steady flow of shared thoughts became choppy and broken. Entire sections of the brain went dark, like lights being turned off in a big building. Minji sat up straight, her heart beating fast. She had never seen anything like this before. The alien's mind, which had been perfectly connected to its species for hours, was now scattered and confused. The singing in the hallway grew louder as the person got closer. With each note, more sections of the alien's brain shut down. The creature, that had been part of a great collective mind, was becoming something else, something alone. The door to her lab opened and Hyun stepped inside. He was a maintenance worker, a quiet man in his 50s who fixed broken equipment and cleaned the floors. He usually worked during the day, but sometimes he stayed late to finish special projects. "Sorry, Dr. Park," he said, looking embarrassed. "I did not know you were still working. I was just checking the air filters in this section." "Hyun, wait," Minji said quickly. "That song you were singing, can you do it again?" He looked confused but nodded. "It is just an old song my mother taught me. Nothing special." "Please," Minji said, pointing to her screen. "Just hum it while you work." Hyun began to sing again, his voice filling the quiet lab. The melody was simple but beautiful, full of warmth and memory. As he sang, Minji watched her screen in amazement. The alien's brain activity became weaker and weaker. The shared thoughts that connected it to its species faded away like smoke. But something even more interesting was happening. New patterns began to appear on the screen, patterns Minji had never seen in any Kalani brain before. They were small and chaotic, nothing like the organized thoughts of the collective mind. They looked almost like individual thoughts. "This is impossible," Minji whispered to herself. She called her research partner, Dr. Jiwon Kim, even though it was the middle of the night. Jiwon arrived 20 minutes later, looking tired and confused. "What is so important that it could not wait until morning?" Jiwon asked. "Look at this," Minji said, showing him the brain scans. "Hyun, can you sing that song one more time?" As the maintenance worker's gentle voice filled the room again, both scientists watched the screen in silence. The aliens' collective thoughts disappeared completely, replaced by something that looked remarkably like human brain patterns. Individual, unique, and completely separate from the hive mind. "The music is breaking their connection," Jiwon said slowly. But how is that possible? Minji felt a chill run down her back as she began to understand. Maybe it is not just music. Maybe it is something deeper. Something about being human. 3 floors below them, in its cell, the captured Kalani warrior sat quietly in the corner. For the first time in its life, it was alone with its own thoughts. The voice of the collective, which had guided every moment of its existence, was gone. In its place was something new and frightening and wonderful. The alien did not know what to call this feeling. Humans had a word for it, but the Kalani language had no way to express the concept of individual identity. The war was about to change in ways nobody could imagine. Admiral Siak sat in his office reading Dr. Park's report for the 3rd time. The words made no sense to him. Outside his window, he could see the lights of damaged ships returning from another failed battle. 3 more colonies had fallen to the Kalani in the past week. Thousands of human soldiers were dead or missing. Music? He said out loud, shaking his head. She wants me to fight aliens with music? His assistant, Lieutenant Day, stood at attention, near the door. The young officer had read the report too. His face showed the same confusion that Admiral Siak felt. Sir, Dr. Park says she has proof. The brain scans show clear evidence that human artistic expression disrupts their collective consciousness. Admiral Siak threw the report on his desk. Lieutenant, I have been fighting wars for 30 years. I have never won a battle with a song. But sir, we have tried everything else. Our weapons barely scratch their ships. Our best strategies fail because they think as one mind. Maybe we need to try something completely different. The Admiral looked out his window again. In the distance, he could see the lights of refugee ships arriving from the latest attack. Families who had lost everything. Children who would never see their homes again. The traditional methods of war were not working. The Kalani were too organized, too coordinated, too perfect. How many people did we lose at Kepler Station? He asked quietly. 15,000, sir. The entire colony. Admiral Siak closed his eyes. 15,000 people gone in 6 hours. The Kalani had attacked with their usual precision, overwhelming the defenses before anyone could react. If there was even a small chance that Dr. Park was right, he had to try it. Contact Dr. Park, he said finally. Tell her she has permission for a field test, but I want it small. 1 strike team, 1 minor engagement. If this fails, I do not want to lose any more people to this crazy idea. 2 days later, Lieutenant Day found himself standing in a supply room, looking at the strangest military equipment he had ever seen. Instead of guns and explosives, the shelves were filled with speakers, music players, and recording devices. Dr. Park and her team had worked without sleep to prepare everything. These sonic transmitters can broadcast sound across a wide area, Dr. Park explained, handing him a device that looked like a small backpack. We have loaded them with different types of human music and art. Classical music, folk songs, poetry, readings, even children's lullabies. Lieutenant Day picked up one of the devices. It was lighter than he expected. And you really think this will stop them? The laboratory tests were clear, Dr. Park said. When exposed to human artistic expression, the Kalani lose their connection to the collective mind. They become confused and unable to coordinate their attacks. Day's team consisted of 12 soldiers, all volunteers who had agreed to test the new equipment. They called themselves the Music Squad, though not everyone thought it was funny. Sergeant Nari, the team's communications expert, had been skeptical from the beginning. I have been in combat for 8 years, she told Day privately. I have seen soldiers die because their equipment failed. What happens if these fancy speakers break down in the middle of a battle? Then we use our regular weapons, Day replied, but Dr. Park says we might not need them. The test site was New Busan Colony, a small settlement on the edge of human space. Intelligence reports showed that a Kalani scouting force was approaching the system. It was perfect for a small-scale experiment. The colonists had been evacuated 2 days earlier, leaving behind empty buildings and silent streets. Day's team took positions around the main settlement, each soldier carrying both traditional weapons and the new sonic equipment. They did not have to wait long. The Kalani ships appeared in the sky just after sunrise, dark shapes moving in perfect formation, Landing craft descended toward the colony like deadly birds carrying hundreds of alien warriors. The attack began exactly as it had in every previous battle. Fast, coordinated, overwhelming. "This is it," Day said into his radio. "Activate the sonic transmitters on my command." The alien soldiers poured out of their ships and advanced toward the settlement. They moved like a single organism, each warrior knowing exactly where to go without any visible communication. Their weapons fired in perfect rhythm, their movements synchronized down to the smallest detail. Day waited until they were halfway across the open ground between their ships and the buildings. Then he gave the order that would either save the colony or get his entire team killed. "Music squad, activate transmitters, all frequencies, maximum volume." The air filled with sound. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony burst from speakers hidden around the settlement. Traditional Korean folk songs echoed off the empty buildings. A children's choir sang a lullaby that drifted across the battlefield like a gentle breeze. The effect was immediate and shocking. The advancing Kalani warriors suddenly stopped moving. Their perfect formation broke apart as individual soldiers began to wander in different directions. Some dropped their weapons. Others stood completely still, as if they had forgotten where they were or what they were supposed to be doing. "It is working," Sergeant Nari whispered into her radio, her voice full of amazement. "They are completely confused." For the first time in months, human forces won a battle against the Kalani, not through superior firepower or clever tactics, but through something much simpler and more beautiful. The sound of human creativity had broken an enemy that seemed unbeatable. Admiral Siak received the battle report an hour later. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. Dr. Jiwon Kim sat across from the captured Kalani commander in a white room deep inside the research station. The alien looked different now than it had 3 weeks ago. Its large eyes, once bright and focused, now seemed confused and distant. The constant playing of human music had changed something fundamental in its mind. The creature no longer moved with the sharp, precise actions of a warrior. Instead, it sat quietly, sometimes tilting its head as if listening to sounds only it could hear. Dr. Kim had been trying to communicate with it for days using a special telepathic device that translated thoughts into words. "Can you hear me?" Dr. Kim asked, speaking slowly and clearly. The alien's head turned toward him. When it spoke, its voice sounded hollow and strange, like an echo in an empty cave. "I hear you," it said. "But the voices of my people are gone. I am alone." This was the breakthrough Dr. Kim had been waiting for. For the first time, a Kalani was speaking as an individual, not as part of the collective mind. He leaned forward, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Tell me about your people. How do you normally think and communicate?" The alien was quiet for a long moment. Its hands moved restlessly on the table, touching the surface as if it had never felt such a thing before. "We are one," it said finally. "Since the time of the Great Joining, we have been one mind, one purpose, one thought. Individual thinking was removed from our species long ago." "Removed how?" Dr. Kim asked. "Our ancestors decided that separate thoughts led to conflict and inefficiency. They created the collective, a shared consciousness that connects every Kalani from birth to death. We think together, plan together, act together. It made us strong. It made us perfect." Dr. Kim felt a chill run through him. "And now?" The alien looked directly at him for the first time. "Now I am broken, cut off from the collective. I think thoughts that belong only to me, and it is frightening." In the observation room next door, Dr. Minji Park watched the conversation through a one-way window. She was taking notes, but her hands were shaking. What she was learning changed everything they thought they knew about the war. "Dr. Park," said Admiral Siak, who had come to witness the interrogation himself. "What exactly is happening to this creature?" "The music is not just disrupting their communication," Minji explained. "It is forcing them to become individuals. The Kalani evolved as a hive mind species, but our artistic expressions are awakening something they thought they had eliminated forever. Individual consciousness," Admiral Siak said slowly. "Exactly. Every song, every poem, every story represents a unique human experience. When the Kalani encounter these expressions, their collective mind cannot process them. The chaos of human creativity overloads their shared neural network. Back in the interrogation room, Dr. Kim continued his questions. What happens when you hear human music? The alien closed its eyes. The songs create pictures in my mind, pictures that belong to no one else. I see colors that have no names in our language. I feel emotions that the collective never taught us to understand. What kind of emotions? Sadness that is beautiful, joy that comes from nowhere, a feeling of being separate, unique. I think your people call it loneliness, but also freedom. Dr. Kim made notes quickly. This was incredible. The Kalani were not just losing their connection to the hive mind. They were discovering what it meant to be individual beings. Tell me about your species before the Great Joining, he said. The alien was quiet for a very long time. When it spoke again, its voice was different, softer, more uncertain. The memories are difficult to access. They are buried deep in our genetic history. But I think we once created things, beautiful things, art, music, stories. Each Kalani had their own thoughts, their own dreams. What happened to that creativity? The leaders said it caused chaos, wars, disagreement. They decided that efficiency was more important than individual expression. The collective was created to unite all Kalani under one perfect thought. Those who resisted were eliminated. Minji felt tears in her eyes as she listened. An entire species had given up the very thing that made life meaningful. They had traded their creativity, their individuality, their souls for the cold perfection of the hive mind. And now? Dr. Kim asked gently. Now your music is waking up the old parts of our minds, the parts we thought were dead forever. When I hear your songs, I remember what it feels like to be me, not us, just me. Admiral Siak turned to Dr. Park. So our artistic expressions are not weapons against them. They are medicine? In a way, yes, Minji said. We are not destroying the Kalani, we are healing them, helping them remember what they lost. The alien in the next room suddenly began to hum. It was a strange, sad melody that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside its memory. Dr. Kim had never heard anything like it. What is that song? He asked. I do not know, the alien replied, looking surprised. I think I made it. Just now it is mine. For the first time since the interrogation began, the creature smiled. It was a small, uncertain smile, but it was real. It was individual. It belonged to no one else in the universe. The war was not what anyone had thought it was. The Kalani were not conquerors. They were prisoners of their own perfection, and human creativity was the key to their freedom. Captain Su-young stood on the bridge of her battlecruiser Harmony, watching enemy ships approach through the darkness of space. 6 months ago, she would have been preparing weapons and shields for another hopeless battle. Today, she was checking the volume levels on her ship's new sonic broadcast system. Music array ready, Captain, reported her communications officer, Ensign Taemin. We have Vivaldi's 4 Seasons loaded in the primary speakers, Korean traditional drums in the secondary array, and jazz music ready for close combat. Remember, Su-young said to her crew, this is not just a battle. This is a concert. And we are about to give the performance of our lives. The Kalani fleet moved in perfect formation, just as they always did. 12 heavy cruisers and dozens of smaller ships, all controlled by the same collective mind. Their coordination was flawless, their tactics perfect. But Captain Su-young was no longer afraid of their perfection. Begin Operation Symphony, she ordered. All ships, activate music arrays on my mark. The human fleet had been completely redesigned over the past 3 months. Every ship now carried powerful speakers instead of extra weapons. Every captain had been given training in musical warfare. Artists and musicians served alongside soldiers and engineers. This is Admiral Sayok to all ships, came the voice over the radio. "Today we fight not with bullets and bombs, but with the power of human creativity. Let them hear what it means to be truly alive." Captain Soo-young smiled and raised her hand. Around her, 30 human ships waited for her signal. In the distance, the Kalani fleet continued its approach, unaware that everything was about to change. "Fire!" she shouted. But instead of laser, cannons and missiles, the human ships unleashed something far more powerful. Vivaldi's Spring burst across the void of space, transmitted directly into the Kalani ships. The beautiful melody, full of life and energy and individual expression, hit the enemy fleet like a wall of pure chaos. The effect was immediate. The perfect formation of Kalani ships began to break apart. Some vessels stopped moving entirely, while others began flying in random directions. The collective mind that controlled them was being overwhelmed by the beauty and complexity of human music. "Direct hit with classical music," reported Ensign Taemin, grinning widely. "Their lead ships are completely confused." "Switch to traditional, Korean drums," Soo-young ordered. "Let them feel the rhythm of our ancestors." The deep, powerful sound of Korean percussion filled space, each beat carrying centuries of human culture and emotion. More Kalani ships began to drift aimlessly, their crews inside struggling with thoughts and feelings they had never experienced before. On the ground below, Commander Hyun led his troops in the strangest military advance in human history. Instead of tanks and artillery, his forces moved behind massive speakers playing everything from children's lullabies to rock and roll. The Kalani ground forces, once so terrifyingly organized, wandered around the battlefield in complete confusion. "Squad 3, play some jazz music on the Eastern Front," Hyun commanded through his radio. "The enemy is trying to regroup there." Sergeant Nari's unit responded immediately, filling the air with the improvised beauty of jazz. The music was perfect for breaking Kalani coordination because jazz was all about individual expression within group harmony. Each instrument played its own unique part while still working together to create something beautiful. The Kalani soldiers stopped fighting and began to listen. Some dropped their weapons entirely, sitting down where they stood as if hearing music for the first time in their lives. Others began to move their bodies in strange, uncertain ways, as if they wanted to dance but had forgotten how. Young pilot Minji discovered something amazing during her attack run against enemy fighters. She had been playing classical music when she accidentally activated a second audio channel loaded with Korean folk songs. The combination of different musical styles created an even stronger effect on the Kalani ships. "Command, this is Pilot Minji," she reported excitedly. "Mixing different types of music makes them even more confused. I just disabled 3 enemy fighters with a combination of Bach and traditional Korean ballads." Within hours, word spread through the human fleet about fusion attacks. Pilots began experimenting with combining different musical genres, creating unique soundscapes that the Kalani collective mind could not process. Classical mixed with rock music. Folk songs played alongside electronic beats. Children's lullabies combined with military marching songs. The results were devastating for the enemy. Each new musical fusion created patterns of chaos that overwhelmed different parts of the Kalani collective consciousness. Ships that had been invincible became helpless. Warriors who had never known defeat sat in meditation-like poses, listening to sounds their species had not heard for thousands of years. Captain Soo-young watched as the last Kalani ships in her sector stopped fighting entirely. Their crews had surrendered not to superior weapons but to the irresistible power of human artistic expression. "All enemy vessels have ceased hostile actions," reported Ensign Taemin. "They are requesting permission to listen to more music?" Soo-young laughed, a sound full of joy and relief. "Grant their request, Ensign. Play them something beautiful. They have been living in silence for far too long." As Beethoven's Ninth Symphony filled the space between the two fleets, human and Kalani ships drifted together in the darkness. The war was ending not with explosions and death but with music and the awakening of souls that had been sleeping for millennia. The Symphony of War had become a symphony of hope. Dr. Minji Park walked through the rehabilitation center on New Seoul Colony, listening to sounds she had never imagined possible. In one room, a former Kalani warrior was learning to play a simple wooden flute. The alien's long fingers moved awkwardly over the holes, producing notes that were sometimes beautiful and sometimes terrible, but always uniquely its own. "It is harder than I expected," the Kalani said to its human teacher, a gentle woman named Sunho. "When I was part of the collective, everything was easy because the knowledge was shared. Now I must learn with only my own mind. That is what makes it special," Sunho replied patiently. "When you play music that comes from your own heart, it belongs to no one else in the universe." 6 months had passed since the last Kalani stronghold surrendered. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Thousands of former enemy soldiers were struggling with their newfound individuality, trying to understand what it meant to think and feel as separate beings. Dr. Minji had never expected this problem when she first discovered that human music could disrupt the Kalani collective mind. She had thought the aliens would simply become confused and harmless. Instead, they had become something much more complicated and wonderful. They had become individuals. Dr. Park called Admiral Siak, who now served as Director of Interspecies Cultural Exchange. "You need to see this." He led her to the art therapy wing where former Kalani soldiers worked alongside human artists. What she saw there took her breath away. On the walls hung paintings that seemed to move with their own inner light. Sculptures made of crystalline material caught the sunlight and threw rainbows across the room. Music boxes played melodies that sounded like nothing from Earth or the Kalani homeworld. "They are creating art," Admiral Siak said with wonder in his voice. "Not copying human art or remembering old Kalani traditions. They are making something completely new." Near the window, a Kalani artist named Veltar was working on a painting that hurt to look at directly. The colors seemed to shift and change, showing images of memories that belonged to millions of minds at once, but filtered through the experience of one individual consciousness. "It is my memory of the collective," Veltar explained when Minji approached. "But now I see it through my own eyes, not the eyes of everyone. It looks different, sad and beautiful at the same time." In another corner of the room, a group of young Kalani were learning to write poetry with help from human teacher Jiwon. Their poems were strange and moving, full of concepts that had no names in either human or Kalani languages. "Listen to this," Jiwon said, holding up a piece of paper. "This is what Zekra wrote about experiencing individual thought for the first time." He read the poem aloud. "I am one voice in the silence, where once was the song of millions. The quiet frightens me, but in the fear, I find myself. I am small, but I am real. I am alone, but I am free." Minji felt tears in her eyes. The poetry was rough and simple, but it carried an emotional weight that was impossible to ignore. These beings were learning to be human in the deepest sense of the word, not by copying human behavior, but by discovering their own capacity for individual expression. "There is something else you should see," Admiral Seok said, leading her toward the main auditorium. Inside, preparations were underway for the most important concert in galactic history. Human and Kalani musicians worked together, preparing a symphony that would be broadcast to every world in human space, and to the Kalani homeworld as well. The conductor was Maestro Hyun, the same maintenance worker who had first hummed the Korean folk song that started everything. He stood before an orchestra unlike anything that had ever existed before. Human violins sat next to Kalani crystal harps. Earth drums played alongside alien percussion instruments that created sounds like wind through crystal caves. "The harmony is perfect," Hyun explained to Minji as they watched the rehearsal. "Human music is chaotic and individual, but Kalani music is about connection and unity. When we combine them, we create something that neither species could make alone." As the mixed orchestra played, Minji understood that they were witnessing the birth of something entirely new. Not human culture or Kalani culture, but a fusion that honored both while creating something greater than either. Later that evening, the concert began. The first movement was purely human, featuring classical pieces that had helped win the war. The second movement was traditional Kalani music, recovered from genetic memories and played for the first time in thousands of years. But the third movement was the real miracle. Human and Kelani instruments played together, creating harmonies that seemed to make the air itself sing. The music told the story of two species learning to understand each other, of individuals finding their voices within a greater symphony. Dr. Minji sat in the audience listening to the impossible beauty of the performance. Beside her sat Veltar, the Kelani artist, who was crying tears of joy. "This is what we lost," Veltar whispered. "This is what the collective took from us, the ability to create something beautiful together while still being ourselves." As the final notes faded away, broadcast across the galaxy to millions of listeners on both sides of the former war, Minji realized that their greatest discovery had never been a weapon at all. It had been the understanding that creativity and individuality were not just human traits but universal gifts that belong to all conscious beings. The secret weapon that saved humanity had become the bridge that would unite the galaxy.